Okay, we're back now. Keep that music up there, D. I want to hear a little bit more of that Elmore James. Keep that up there. Hold on, let's turn that up a little bit. What is that? A little Elmore James. Let's listen to that. Oh, yeah. You don't often hear that. You hear the Allman Brothers' view of that, right? You hear that Done Somebody Wrong. There's the original right there. Elmore James, Done Somebody Wrong. Isn't that awesome? Anyway, here we're back with Justice for All. I'm George Yates. I'm here with my engineer, D, and my producer, Greg. And how you guys doing today, huh? Well, that was a great show here with Candace Platter, Loving an Addict, Loving Yourself. That was top 10 survival tips for loving someone with an addiction. And, boy, I'll tell you what, it's everywhere. As a defense lawyer, you know, I see it every day. People coming in and they got their problems, and then you end up in court, and it's just a cycle. And the people that are helping them are sometimes enablers. I had a case yesterday. I mean, I got a fourth offense DUI, and I see the parents, and I'm going, wow, they're just the enablers of the kid, you know, 20. You know, so but you know, hopefully he'll get help, and maybe this will be it. You know, because he's done some jail. Sometimes that's what ends up having to happen. Anyway, here we are. Topic overload. You know, we got a lot of stuff going on. You know, last week we had the lady on the show with the. I guess 2 weeks ago we had Toxic Communities guest, right? And that was talking about how these segregated black communities were segregated for years and years, and then last week, you know, our guest, we were talking about mass incarceration in America, and it just seems like, you know, and then here we are with the Gardner indictment or lack of an indictment in New York, and the Furguson thing. I remember last week our guest was saying. We haven't even talked about Furguson. I was talking for 2 hours about you know, mass incarceration in America and how we've locked up more people than anybody on the planet Earth. And she said, "Yeah, you talked about Furguson." I said, "Well, everybody else is talking about Furguson." So now with this Gardner thing, and now even when OReilly and John Stewart all agree on something, then you know that you got an issue in the country. And I was watching, Hardball last night on MSN, NBC, and there was Chris Matthews showing all these film clips of all the conservative columnists. You know, I mean, everyone is outraged at this Gardner lack of indictment. And anyway, so and now with this boy, what was it, D? You were showing me the video this morning. Engineer D was showing the little boy, the 12-year-old kid in Cleveland, who was shot by the cop. What was his name? Tamir Rice, little 12-year-old boy that had the toy pistol.
I read that. I saw the video on that one.
So it's just like, you know, the story of the story of the week in America is. You know, racism, race. You know, and when we start talking about Justice for All, it's the name of our show. And every week, I like to interview people that come on the show, and they're experts in all kinds of stuff. You know, like we've got these law professors that come on, and we've had Brandon Garrett from UVA, and we've had you know, the fellows that write books about the Supreme Court, and then, like I said, we've had these guests on mass incarceration. It just seems like we get back to problems with race in the country. And what's been fascinating about the Furguson thing was that, you know, the knee-jerk reaction among the white community was to talk about how black people are killing other black people. And the real problem is, you know, black crime and this and that. That's what white people were saying, right? And then the black people are all out there. And it became a black versus white thing, or a liberal versus conservative thing, the whole Furguson, right? I mean, that was the whole narrative of Furguson. And but what you saw with Furguson was that the way that the prosecutor in that case completely controlled the indictment process, the grand jury process. He could put on the witnesses that he wanted to. And now a lot of people in this country that have absolutely no idea what a grand jury is now are being exposed to really what a grand jury is. I mean, for people that listen to our show and go, "Oh, Justice for All, it's about, you know, the law and process." And we've had jury consultants on, you know, talking about how we select juries. I've had, you know, the O.J. Simpson trial consultant and talking about that was a very racially charged case, you know, the O.J. Simpson, you know, over 20 years ago now. But now people, a lot of times, like, for instance, I'll say, "Okay, we're going to a jury trial." And people will go, "Oh," and they'll go, "The grand jury?" You know, like what's the difference? You know, there's a grand jury, then there's the jury. Well, you know, for those of you that don't know the process, right? If you go to a trial, you know, like you're trying to decide guilt or innocence, that's a jury trial, right? There's 12 people sitting in the box, you know. In Virginia, there's you know, there's 7 people in a civil case. There's 12 people in a criminal case. But the grand jury is different. You know, the grand jury is an investigative body. They're not determining guilt or innocence. They're just determining whether or not somebody should even be charged in the first place. It's not a you know, if for instance, if the police officer, what's his name, Wilson, if Wilson had been indicted in the Furguson case, if they'd brought back an indictment, it wouldn't necessarily mean he was guilty. They weren't trying to decide guilt or innocence of him. It was just, should there be a trial? That's the only issue. Is there enough evidence in this case that there should at least be a trial? And somehow there was no indictment at all of the Wilson police officer. Now, are you trying to tell me that there was not enough evidence in that case that there should have at least been a trial? I mean, maybe he would have been found not guilty at trial. But a lot of times, you know, the way that we're now seeing this narrative that, you know, prosecutors owe it to the police. You know, the prosecutor has to work hand in glove with the police department. And so he says, well, you know what? I don't want to, you know, indict my local police officer. I'm going to put the evidence on in such a way that he doesn't even get indicted. Well, shouldn't there have been a special prosecutor in that Furguson case so that prosecutor, there's a conflict of interest there, right? I mean, there was. He shouldn't have been having to make a decision about prosecuting his own police department. You know, they should have brought in a special prosecutor on Furguson. And the same thing in New York with this Gardner thing. Now, what's interesting about Gardner is that everybody agrees that Gardner is a travesty of justice, right? I mean,
yeah, I mean.
Anyway, Greg, what's the name of our show? Justice for Y'all.
Sometimes there's justice for y'all, but there's no justice for all.
So, but you cannot. I mean, the issue of race in this country is just we can't get away from it. And now that we got the Cleveland Police Department, we got federal investigations going now in 20 communities around the country. And I'm just wondering to what extent this is all going to shake out. I think that there was a lot of white backlash to Furguson. You know, saying, well, you know, there's a problem with black crime in America, so, you know, get over it. You know, black America, liberal America. But now you cannot escape this Gardner thing. I mean, here's a guy selling cigarettes on a street corner. Okay, you know, there is absolutely no problem with this guy. And he's saying, I can't breathe 11 times. It's just wild that there was no indictment brought in that. So now there's not a person in America that looks at that doesn't say, wait a minute, there is something wrong with our justice system. There is not justice for all. And, you know, and there it was on video. You know, there was no video of the Michael Brown, and that was the difference in the case. Now, what's this? Now, you showed me a video today, D. What was that? There's a video of this
12-year-old Tamir Rice.
But we can't really see what the little boy was doing with the gun, right?
Apparently, he was just showing people. You know, it wasn't waving or nothing. He was showing it, and apparently it was like an airsoft gun.
Yeah, but we can't see it from that video.
Right,
the little boy, we see him at the beginning of it before the police officers. How many of you all out there have seen this video? It's of the Rice. Was that in Cleveland?
Yeah, Ohio. Yep.
Yeah. So you know, we got this 12-year-old kid that's got a little airsoft gun, and doesn't it have something? Aren't those guns? Don't they?
Like an orange tip
Yeah.
on it, yeah.
That one didn't know, but it's still, when you see the video, it's shocking. And then there was even the guy that had the BB gun in Walmart that got shot. I saw that on video. That was horrible. The guy
They have that on video too?
Yeah.
Well, and the police officer in the case in Cleveland I just saw was had been fired from some other police department. Did you see that?
Mm-mm.
He had been fired from a suburban Cleveland police department, where obviously the crime is not nearly going to be as hardcore as in downtown, and so he got hired by the Cleveland police department and they didn't even check his background. I don't think they even knew that he had been fired from the suburban police department because he apparently did not have the right psychological makeup to and they had let him go. And so he gets picked up there in the downtown Cleveland department, which Cleveland Police Department have a heck of a lot more hardcore. He drives up and he shoots this 12-year-old, and then you see him jumping out of the car, right? And
Yeah,
he's
they
like,
said it was estimated of 1.5 seconds.
yeah,
Right
so
before he shot the kid, no get down on the ground, put your hands up, nothing like that. As soon as he got out of the car, he just shot him.
So, but I mean, we've just got a problem in the whole country, and I wonder to what extent it is that we all just, we try to say that we aren't racist and we're above all that, and I just, it's just really hard, if you take surveys, you can just see it. Like how many people agree? I'll bet you if you did a survey right now, how many people agree that the grand jury in Furguson did the right thing in not indicting, Officer Wilson? And a majority of the white people will say they did the right thing. Majority of the black people will say they didn't do the right thing. We have such a racial divide in America, and I wonder, we look at the TV commercials during football games, and we see, the bros all hanging out, drinking beer and watching the ball game, and it's always, the two white guys and the two black guys, all hanging out. And I'm not saying that we all don't hang out. There's a lot more mixing of the races than there used to be. But it seems to me still that we've got a lot of, black folks are hanging out with black folks, and white folks are hanging out with white folks, and there's not a lot of mixing of the races like there used to be, or like there. Or like we try to make it out like there is. So I just don't think that there's not a lot of communication still from black to white. And I think one of the problems, of course, is that you get sometimes the spokesman for you get like Al Sharpton, who's the spokesman for the black people, and yet Al Sharpton, he doesn't exactly come to the table untainted. I mean, he kind of started out with a Tawana Brawley thing, and he was kind of an avowed, he was kind of a racist sort of guy from the beginning. Al Sharpton wouldn't be my appointed spokesman for black issues because he already comes with baggage, right? So I don't know. It seems to me like the liberals don't they don't do it the right way of getting the message across. So. Anyway, here we are. It's Justice for All. I'm George Yates. I'm here with, Greg Hall and Dee Thomas, and we just had a great last hour, and we're just kind of, hanging out here on a Saturday afternoon on Justice for All, talking about what's going on in the world today. I get a big kick out of I'm looking at the newspaper today. I will move on from Ferguson and cop shootings and everything else. That's all going to shake itself out over time, though. I think.
Well, I got one question for you on
Sure.
that. Do you think that something's going to happen now with the cams on the bodies for these police officers? You think that's going to end up being a big initiative now?
Well, I've seen that a lot in my practice lately. It used to be you'd go do it. Now there's cameras on almost everything now, which is great. I mean, I just did a murder preliminary hearing yesterday. Okay, very bad case. I don't even get into the details of it. I mean, just a kind of a horrific type killing of a case, but the police officer that questioned, my client, 6 hours, interview, and all of it on videotape. So there's not going to be any issue, as to what he said. And we see this. It's nowadays, and Virginia Beach is doing a good job with with their police department. And now there's cams. Now almost every DUI you see now, you're on a cam. I think the cams are going to change everything. I think the cams are going to change everything with policing going forward. Absolutely. Good question. Because, if you're a cop and you're coming up to a kid on the street, a man on the street, and you can say right there, you're on camera. You understand? You're on camera. And that's going to keep you honest, and that's going to keep the police officer honest because you're on camera. And you're not going to be able, it's going to be, that's the way it's going to be. But they're going to have to make sure that the cameras don't just, malfunction at the wrong time. And, they're going to have to make sure that, I think it's going to change everything, Greg. I really do.
They need to stream to a location that can't be tampered with, that is away from that, that area of local influence, because then you don't have the camera broke or we lost the video or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know how they do it logistically or technically. It's going to be a whole nother question, but the fact that you can, I remember my very first, when I left the Commonwealth Attorney's Office years ago and I tried a murder case in Norfolk, and there was a statement made by, my client charged with a murder back in 1990. And there was no video, there was no audio, there was no nothing. It was just a police officer that came back with, here is what he said. I've seen this a lot in the past. Police officer come out and say, yeah, I took some written notes. Here was a standard interrogation in the old days. Police officer comes in, talks to the client or talks to the defendant, makes some written notes, and then he would say, okay, after I took my written notes, I then transcribed them, and then I destroyed my handwritten notes, and then here it is, and it would be like a page. I said, well, how? So I would try these cases, and the statement that the defendant made would often be the most important, piece of evidence against him. And the officer takes a stand, and I'd say, okay, officer, you questioned my client for how long? Mr. Johnson, an hour. I said, well, I read through the statement, this typewritten statement, and I read the whole thing. It takes me about a minute to read the entire transcript of what you say he said. What did you all talk about for the other 59 minutes? Is that on here? Well, this is just a summary of what he said. And I would say, okay. Well, now, did you record any of that? Well, no. Well, why not? Well, I just don't do that. That's just not my procedure. Well, I mean, you say you couldn't afford a $29 tape recorder from Radio Shack. You just didn't think it was important at the time that you questioned him. Did you realize that? Did you give him his Miranda rights? Yes. Did you know that you were going to be using this statement against him in court? Yes. And you knew that at some point then it would be used against him, perhaps in front of a judge or a jury. Didn't he tell you when you were first questioning him that he didn't do it? Yes. So and then later on, of course, now you're saying that during the course of it, he admitted to some other things. Didn't you think it was important that it be recorded somewhere? If not on video, at least on audio? Well, that's just not my procedure. Well, you try those cases like that, juries don't buy it. Juries will throw it out. The juries just don't buy that stuff anymore. And fortunately, police departments aren't doing that anymore. But that's the way it used to be. I think it still is with some police. But I think that the fact that we've realized that we've got the technology to do that, to tape record. We've had so many false confession type cases now. And we've got these, and now we've got the technology to do it. And I think it's going to change everything. It's changed law enforcement. It's changed the way that we do investigations. And I think going forward, the fact that we've got cameras, we've got recorders, and it's going to really change everything for the better. So, because if police officers have got a camera on them right there, I've got a DUI case coming up right now. I've got the video. My client you can see the entire thing. He's standing there. He's going through all the field sobriety tests. And I said, this is a pass. We haven't gone to trial yet on it, but I'm looking at this video. I'm going, well, if you look at this guy does not look like he's under the influence from the standpoint of any of these field sobriety that I'm watching right here on the camera. So I think that it's going to really change everything for the better. So that was a good question. And so going forward from our, police officers and everything else, but I do think going forward that, and we're going to go to break here in just a little bit, but before we move on from this subject, I do think that the fact that we've got the federal government, that can come in and be impartial and start investigating Gardner case, because they're coming in now. And they're going to, and isn't the new Attorney General nominee, isn't she from Brooklyn?
I don't know.
It wasn't Gardner, Brooklyn? Isn't it New York? It's Brooklyn.
I know it's somewhere in New York. I'm not
so
sure.
the new nominee, I don't know her name right now, but she's a black female from Brooklyn, former prosecutor. So I think that's her stomping ground. And so I think that as the new Attorney General comes in, it's going to be Eric Holder. I think hasn't quite left office yet. So, but before she comes in, I think that's going to we're going to need to change the way some of these grand juries are being conducted. I don't think people like it. I think enough people are saying, wait a minute, after Gardner, they're rethinking the way the Furguson one was handled, right? I mean, because everybody, I think, agreed with, all right, it was a grand jury, but it wasn't transparent. The way that grand jury, I think that it got through. Of course, people rioted and did all that kind of stuff after, but, now that they've Now the Gardner, I don't think the Furguson indictment's going to be as, popular as it was, even among the. And when you've got OReilly and Sean Hannity and Krauthammer and all of the conservatives all agreeing with all of the liberals, I think, wow, when was the last time you saw that they all agreed about anything? So maybe there's progress can be made in the country. We're going to take a little break. When we come back, I'm going to talk about some of the other news in the country. And this is Justice for All with George Yates, and we'll be right back.
Hello, this is Big Bear inviting you to visit myself and Grandma Bear at Little Bear's Consignment Boutique, where you'll find the best new and gently used children's brand name clothing and equipment. Clothing from newborn to teens. Dresses, suits, shoes, strollers, bassinets, toys, and anything else you need. Little Bear's is your stop. We even carry maternity clothes. Check us out on Facebook or stop in 200 North Battlefield Boulevard in the Harbor Watch Shops of Chesapeake near the locks. Little Bear's Consignment Boutique, where you're always greeted with a smile.
The place for authentic Indian food is the India Palace. They feature authentic Indian cuisine, have a party hall, and do catering and banquets. Open daily for lunch and dinner, they feature an excellent lunch buffet at their 2 establishments. Visit the 2 locations, 1437 Sam's Drive in Chesapeake off Battlefield and 5600 Virginia Beach Boulevard. Online, IndiaPalaceVB.com. On Facebook, look for India Palace Virginia Beach and India Palace Bar and Grill. Call 410-1183 for the India Palace.
The restaurant we've all been waiting for is here. Introducing Ipan Mano Kitchen. Critically acclaimed chef Silva Sennett and his culinary team specialize in new American Asian cuisine. The very best in Chinese, Japanese, Thai food with an American flair. Open daily for lunch and dinner, Ipan Mano Kitchen is located inside the Patrick Henry Mall in Newport News. Call 249-0033 and log on to ipanmanokitchen.com. Find them on Twitter at Ipan Mano.
If finances are holding you back from enrolling your kids or grandkids in private Christian schools, call the radio station at 488-1010. We have a partnership program with several schools on the peninsula and the south side that allows us to offer a 35% discount off tuition for preschool through the 12th grade. Give us a call today at 488-1010 or visit our website at tuitionsolution.org. Did we mention we added daycares to the site? tuitionsolution.org.
It's been a hard day's night, and I've been working like a dog. It's been a hard day's night, I should be sleeping like a log. But when I get home,
Okay, we're back with Justice for All, and we got another 30 minutes to go in our lovely afternoon here in greater Hampton Roads area. This portion of our show is brought to you by Marty's Beach Auto. And you need to go see Marty Myers over at Beach Auto at 6030 East Virginia Beach Boulevard. It's near Military Circle. And you need to drive over there. If you're in your car and you're riding by, you need to go by there. Of course, if you're already in a car, you need to go buy another one. Go anyway. But Marty's there on his lot today, and he's one of our sponsors of our show. And you can call him on your cell at 455-5771. That's Beach Auto Sales at 6030 East Virginia Beach Boulevard. That's Beach Auto at 455-5771. So go by and tell him you heard about him on Justice for All, and Marty will make sure you ride today. Okay? And we're also sponsored by the Virginia Beach Resort and Convention Hotel on Shore Drive, near the intersection of Shore Drive and Great Neck Road. And just to let you know that my band is a frequent player down there at the Resort Hotel and the Tradewinds restaurant there. And if you call in at 454-1650, K-Talk 1650 AM, call in at 454-1650. If anybody calls this next 30 minutes, you get a free gift basket from the Virginia Beach Resort Hotel. And you can't call in, Greg.
No, but haven't you seen those gift baskets? I until I saw one, I didn't know how awesome they are. I mean, these things are humongous, and hey, it is the Christmas season, so you need to get a gift for somebody. There you go.
All right, well, call in anybody other than Marty. Okay, from Beach Auto, okay, but 454-1650, 454-1650, and get that gift basket. I'm telling you what. And then you got to go by the hotel, and then you'll also find out when my band Thumbs Up plays the next time. So anyway, there was other stuff in the news today. Of course, besides that, the two other this Rolling Stone article about the rape at UVA. This supposedly gang rape at the fraternity. There was something about that story when I first read about it and I first heard about it. There was something about that story that bothered me. I'll tell you what, and the reason is because, it was not properly vetted, and it is so easy. These stories of sensational, rapes, people just love it. It's another political thing. It seems to me. I mean, rape is a very serious crime, and it really is. And rape in its true form is just horrific. But what ends up happening so often is I think that the popular media just wants to jump on the bandwagon whenever you get some kind of unsubstantiated account. One of the biggest problems with these rape allegations is that, you can make the allegation and then the person that is the alleged perpetrator is, how is he going to defend himself? The charge is not made that day. It's made much later. There's no physical evidence, and it's just the credibility of this alleged victim. And I'm not trying to say that these things don't happen. Maybe they do, but they've really got to be investigated properly before you're just going to go out and say that something like this occurred. And it seemed like the entire reputation of this great university, University of Virginia, it's been tarred and feathered in the national media now for days, based upon this story in Rolling Stone where they just took the unsubstantiated word of one victim, where the reporter said, I believed her. She seemed credible. I mean, what? Lots of people can seem credible. There are people in this world that are such practiced liars, manipulators, that you believe them. I mean, how many people out there have had somebody tell them something to their face and you believed it hook, line, and sinker, and then you found out later on that you were being completely sold a bill of goods. And this reporter believed that she, had this, magic ability to determine credibility. She never interviewed any of the alleged perpetrators, never did any other investigation other than say, oh, well, she seemed credible to me. And she writes this story and indicts, and by not naming anybody, by not naming the fraternity, not naming anything, she said, that way she could get away with it. But she named the college, she named the whole university, and every fraternity in the whole country, basically, right, was indicted, wasn't it? Because then all of a sudden, it's those crazy frat boys. They all have gang rapes, at every. And then it turned out they started investigating it. Have you seen some of those investigations? Now they've said she had said that it was during some sort of a rush week, and actually in the fall. And turns out that that's not in the fall; it's in the spring. And there was all kinds of parts of her story that didn't add up. And how in the world? Rolling Stone is a pretty cool magazine. I do get it. It has a liberal bent to it. But there's some really great, great writers in that magazine. Matt Taibbi writes some very cool stories about the financial crisis, and very good investigative journalist. Does his homework. Boy, I'd love to have him on our Justice for All show, Greg. We need to get Matt Taibbi. Anybody out there who gets to read anything by Matt Taibbi, Taibi, wow, he's really a sharp guy. And I think that now Rolling Stone's reputation and guys like Matt Taibbi have really been hurt by this kind of nonsense. I'm shocked by it. Anyway, so that's the new thing on, if you haven't read your morning paper about this Rolling Stone article, you should. And it's just crime, because it's a pretty good magazine, and now its reputation is pretty gone down. The other thing I noticed that is in the news today is this jobs report. Have you seen this? The jobs report, 321,000 additional jobs created in November. And now everybody wants to talk about how great the economy is because all these jobs have been created in November. Does anybody really think that the economy is doing great because all these jobs were created? I'm not impressed by it. Are you?
No.
I mean, all you got to do is look around and say, okay, what kind of jobs are those that are being created? They're like these 7-Eleven jobs. I mean, they're $9 and $10, $12 an hour, $15 an hour jobs at the most.
Seasonal, right. And, wages are still not up. I mean, I think they say wages are up, 20 cents or 15 cents
I don't know. It's you read this stuff in the paper, but when you're out there in the real world and you're seeing how people are doing, you realize that the economy is still just in the toilet and has been for a long, long time. Because when you do these unemployment figures, how many of those people that are unemployed are underemployed? Like take your realtor or you're somebody that says, "Oh, I'm employed, but I just don't make half of what I used to make."
Or 2 part-time jobs to make one.
Well, that's it. Yeah, and that's what it is. The only way you can make more money now is to work more hours. Yeah. So anyway, so that's what I was struck by is this jobs report. And they talk about the brighter economy and all that. I mean, I guess it's a step in the right direction, but we are still such a long way before this economy is in any kind of recovery, I think.
I think shouldn't we start thinking about ways to get companies to bring back some of the manufacturing and other things, or should we just leave it offshore like it is? I mean,
well, the bottom line on it is, I'm reading a book now, Republic Lost, and it's when you realize just how broken the whole system is, it's really it's not in Congress's best interest to do that because they're all being paid off by all the by the big corporations. So the big corporations make more money by being able to ship the jobs overseas. They're not coming back. Those jobs aren't coming back because corporations can't make as much money. So that's what'll end up happening. There's a great book out there for those of you who are interested in the kind of thing, Republic Lost by Lawrence Lessig, How Money Corrupts Congress and a Plan to Stop It. And it just goes through, this whole litany of issues in the country today and how, I've been a Democrat for many, many years. I kind of will say, I kind of identify with the Democratic Party. But, who can really identify with either party the way things have been going in the country lately? You identify as a Democrat, but then you go, how can I identify with the Democratic Party when I realize what's the problem in education today? What's the biggest problem in education today? It's the teachers union, because we have a union that it votes Democratic, and it's the most powerful union probably in the Democratic Party. What is the problem with education? Bad teachers. And not to say that we have got some really wonderful public school teachers, but the problem with it is that they're not all wonderful. And if you've got, let's say, 10% of the public school teachers are not good teachers, you can't get rid of them because of the union. And the only way to get rid of that would be to get rid of the teachers union, or at least reform the teachers union. But the teachers union is such an important constituency of the Democratic Party that it's not going to get reformed. So you can't reform education. It's just because the Democrats, it's owned by the Democrats. And they donate too much money and they donate too much time to the Democratic Party. And then anybody, I'm fascinated. When I get out of my show, I'll sometimes listen to that other channel, talk show, and we'll hear these free market guys always talking about the free market. How great the free market is. But you listen to this, you read the Republic Lost book, and you realize that there's no such thing as a free market either. Our markets are so regulated. Every single thing about our markets are regulated, from farming to sugar. We subsidize sugar in this country. Sugar costs 3 times what it should cost. Why? Because the sugar companies donate to congressmen and they pollute the Everglades. Does anybody not know that? Anybody that thinks that we operate in a free market in America just needs to look again. Every single thing is regulated by the government. And Congress passes those laws. And believe me, Republicans do too. And so we've got Republicans that, we've got these big corporations like ADM and Monsanto and these big corporations that pay billions of dollars to congressmen so that they'll pass these laws that subsidize these giant agro farmers. And we end up, paying the bill as taxpayers. Ethanol. Ethanol is the biggest scam that's ever been perpetrated on the American public. It's not a good fuel. It's not good for the environment. What in the world? Why, when we pull into a gas station, do we have 10% of our gasoline as ethanol? Does anybody really think that makes any sense? It's bad fuel. I mean, right, you try to put it in your lawnmower and it won't work after a year. You can't use that fuel. It's not good fuel, and it comes from corn. And the only reason you can think of that ethanol is still used in our gasoline today is because there's a lot of corn producers in Iowa. And Iowa is where the presidential races begin every 4 years. So if you are a congressman or a senator, anybody wants to run for president, you better make those Iowa corn farmers happy. And that ethanol, you don't have to look any further than that. This book also, it gets into, the last financial crisis that we had that was all, what was the reason behind the last financial crisis? Anybody really know the answer? What happened? What happened? Why did the economy come to a crashing halt in 2008? And the reason it did was because years ago we all knew what was, we didn't have a bank failure for years in this country. After the New Deal, there was no problem at all. After 1933, we didn't have any bank crashes. We used to have them about every 20 years. Did you know that? From about 1792, about every 20 years, there were banking crises in this country. About every 20 years or so. But after the Great Depression and the Roosevelt administration came in and we passed all Glass-Steagall, which is the great banking regulation in 1933. And what happened was they put the rules on these banks, so these banks could not make risky trades, and that banks would do banking and traders would do trading, and they wouldn't mix. But guess who? Guess what? Was it a Republican or a Democratic president that came in and decided, you know what? We're going to go ahead and deregulate all of these banks, and we're going to start letting them do more risky things. It wasn't Republicans. It was Bill Clinton. They came in and they started deregulating, and Bill Clinton's administration signed off on the Glass-Steagall Act being, repealed. But, there's a lot of people that say, well, Glass-Steagall and the repeal of Glass-Steagall was not the reason behind the last financial crisis. And it's, to some extent, might be true. At least it was part of it. But the real problem was that 90% of the market was these derivatives. You know what a derivative is, right?
I've read the definition, but I'm going to tell you, I could not tell you what it is.
Well, a derivative is just a bet. A derivative was a way for these brokers to just find other financial products that they could sell to investors instead of it being a stock, which is publicly traded and you can see it on the stock exchange, or a commodity like copper or oil or, pork bellies or whatever. You can see what the future is. It's all transparent and the market is right there. So, the market is self-regulating. And so we do have a free market in those kinds of things. But what happened was they started selling these other things called derivatives. And there was a gal that was running the Commodities and Futures Trade Commission, and she wrote a very extensive article saying that we need to regulate these derivatives. And she was shouted down by Larry Summers, by Robert Rubin, who was the Treasury Secretary under Bill Clinton, and they all said, no, we don't want to regulate these derivatives. And so there was a movement all throughout the powers that be, and they said, we're not going to regulate these. They say government is going to stay out of these derivatives. And what happened was brokers that even were selling things that didn't look like derivatives would say they were derivatives so that they didn't have to be regulated. So when the market crashed in 2008, according to the Lessig book now, and what ends up happening was these brokers were selling things, and people really didn't know what they were buying. They were buying these mortgages that had been bundled into these packages. As Matt Taibbi would say, it was like bundling, he said it was like bundling up a bunch of oregano and saying that it was high-class weed.
Mixing it in with a little bit.
But basically it was like, here, I'm selling you this, but it's really good. So you want to buy it. And of course, but you don't know what it is, and it wasn't regulated. It's not on an exchange. So you would buy it and you didn't really know what was in it, so it was totally super risky. But the banks knew that they would be bailed out. Now, we didn't bail out Lehman Brothers. They went down, but everybody else got bailed out because the banks only cared about themselves. They would say, let's take all this risk because we're just trying to help our taxpayers, our stockholders. And so we don't really care about the taxpayers, because they'll bail us out if we mess up. And if we don't mess up, we're going to make a lot of money. If we go down, well, maybe the government will help us out. And as it turned out, the government did help them out because they were too big to fail. And we all now know that after Lehman Brothers, they let Lehman go down. And as soon as Lehman went down, the whole system looked like it was going to lock up. And that's when they had all this crisis management. And they said, well, now we got to bail out everybody else. So they bailed out AIG, they bailed out Citigroup, they bailed out Bank of America, they bailed out Wells Fargo, and all of them. And, they all would have gone under. And now they're all, as of 2009, there was, J.P. Morgan was sitting pretty. They had their best year ever in 2009. That was Goldman. And, Jamie Dimon, who was the CEO of Goldman, and they had to get bailed out by the government in 2008. And meanwhile, the rest of the people, the rest of the country is still trying to get back since 2008. And it's been, 6 years and counting, because the crisis was right around election time, right, in 2008. So it's now been over 6 years. And now we're supposed to be going, well, this great job report is coming back. And so nothing has really changed from what I've been able to see. We passed this Dodd-Frank law, which was so watered down that the banks are basically back to doing the same thing that they've always been able to do. And the reason is because we have a Congress that's being bribed on both sides. And the Republican Party and the Democratic Party are not a whole heck of a lot different. They spend so much time getting paid off. Both the Republicans and the Democrats are being paid off. And, I'm fascinated by, this book that I'm reading. Mr. Lessig writes this book, and it's called Republic Lost. And you need to get a copy of it. It's on Amazon. And But he talks about this interview with Bill O'Reilly and Jon Stewart. Now, I don't know if you all watch Jon Stewart, but he's like he's the champion, right, on The Daily Show. He's the liberal champion, and he's funny, and he just skewers Fox News like crazy. And he goes after Bill O'Reilly, all the time, right? He loves to go after O'Reilly. And O'Reilly is the kind of guy that liberals love to hate, right? You love to hate Bill O'Reilly if you're a liberal. But he's the most popular guy on TV, right? He's got that show. Well, there was an interview with Jon Stewart with Bill O'Reilly was his guest on The Daily Show. And Stewart was interviewing O'Reilly about his new book. It was called Pinheads and Patriots. And that book came out in 2011. And midway through the interview, Stewart asked O'Reilly this. He said, when are we going to come together and deal with the corruption at the heart of all these problems? And astonishingly, and of course, this is what Lessig says, O'Reilly agreed. O'Reilly agrees? O'Reilly agreed with Jon Stewart. Now, we got to hear, what in the world is O'Reilly going to say he agrees with Jon Stewart? He says, they spend so much time raising money and kissing butt, they don't even think about problem solving. But it cuts both ways. The liberal pinheads are just as bad as the right-wing pinheads. I like O'Reilly now after I hear that. But, rarely, okay, do these two figures agree about something? But here was agreement about the corruption at the heart of all of these problems. And so this is the issue today. The number one issue in the country today is campaign finance reform. Because as long as these politicians are allowed to just accept money and get paid off, it's just nothing but legalized bribery. That is what it is, and it's being said that is what it is. And it's the country's never going to get better. We're in real trouble. I think that the reason why so many people are upset about the the way the country is going forward is I think even Republicans and Democrats realize that their parties are. I mean, if a Republican Party thinks that the Democratic Party is at fault, think again. And if the Democratic Party thinks the Republican Party is at fault, think again. It's the system. And these people are not necessarily corrupt. They're just doing what people do, right? I mean, if someone gives you money, don't you kind of feel like you got to do what they're asking you to do? They're giving you a lot of money, and you need all this money to get reelected. So we did have some campaign finance reform at some point, wasn't it? That John McCain didn't we have a McCain-Feingold bill? And but that's gone now, isn't it? There's no such thing. It's money rules everything.
Are they capable of making actual reform? The Congress?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Well, I haven't finished the book yet, so we'll see. But he's got some points in it that, do you ever listen to Dan Carlin? He's one of your favorites, isn't he?
Yes.
Dan Carlin, those of you out there that are thoughtful, like to listen to radio, you ought to listen to Dan Carlin, Common Sense, and, he's a pretty thoughtful guy.
And Hardcore History is one of my
Hardcore
favorites.
History. Yeah, he writes Hardcore History, does Hardcore History. So he's a good audiobook, his podcast. So Dan Carlin. But he actually has read this Republic Lost book, too, and has a good show on his twist on this book too. So, but does anybody, we talk about the ethanol problem, which is, politicians of both parties. We talk about the education problem with the teachers union. I remember when Bill Clinton came in, as a Democrat, you kind of thought he's going to be the guy, just like Nixon went to China. I remember those of you out there that are old enough to remember that, Nixon went to China, right? 1972, whenever it was. Because only a Republican could have gone to China. And just like only a Republican can reform certain things like the Defense Department because Democrats are perceived to be weak on defense, and also only Republicans can do it. And only a Republican can go to China. Only a Democrat can reform education because Republicans are, the teachers union is not part of the Republican Party. And, I remember reading an editorial in the Wall Street Journal right when Clinton came in, thinking, okay, now's the chance because a Democratic president might be able to reform education. This was 20 years ago now when Clinton was Clinton elected? 91? Yeah. So it's been over 20 years. Did he do anything? No. Because he wasn't about to take on the teachers unions. Because you take on the teachers unions, you've basically upset every single Democratic office holder out there. I used to work for some Democratic folks, doing fundraisers and doing, meet and greets and, crowd gathering for political events and all that. Guess who shows up to get on the phones, to get out the vote? Guess who shows up at the polls? Guess who shows up to get, drive people to the polls? It's teachers unions. They are such an instrumental part of the Democratic Party. And so Democrats need them to get reelected. So, and there's nothing wrong with the public school teachers that I know, they're great. They love their job. And I've had some good experiences with them. But the system itself can't be reformed. If you do have some bad teachers, you can't get rid of them because they are in the system and they have tenure and all that sort of thing. So, and only Republicans are going to be able to do the same thing, their special interests. Have you seen, this financial crisis, for instance? I mean, let's face it, both parties get enormous amounts of money from Wall Street. I mean, Wall Street pays off both Democrats and Republicans. Obama got a huge amount of money from Wall Street in 2008. You think that he ever went after Wall Street? No. Has anybody from Wall Street been prosecuted for this financial meltdown in 2008? These derivatives were fraudulent. I mean, they were fraud. But no one was prosecuted for them. In a regular world, that would have been fraud. But it just was business as usual, and everybody got paid off, and they went on. And so it's not really, I think that we all know this. I think it's all part of the malaise in the country right now, that we all realize that our system is so broken, it's corrupt on both sides. And who was it we had on the show, D, a couple of weeks back? The lady on the toxic communities, wonderful professor, from University of Michigan, and she wrote this book on toxic community. She was so great. I said,
Dorcita Taylor.
Yeah, that's
Dorcita
her name,
Taylor.
right.
And I said, God, you are really great. You ought to be running for Congress. And she goes, oh, no, I'm not corrupt enough for that. And yet, our congressman's not corrupt. I'm sure Scott Ridgell's not corrupt. In fact, he's a wealthy guy, isn't he? He's probably not on the take. Scott Ridgell. He's a wealthy guy. So, and you kind of wonder, well, then what is it about this system that, you got, Mark Warner's a wealthy guy. You find it hard to believe that he's, corrupted by campaign money. But they're not spending their own money in their campaigns. I mean, maybe a little. So they need a lot of money to run for re-election. So I guess even the wealthy guys are going to, let's say, if you're accepting money from this corporation and that interest group and so on, you're going to be beholden to them one way or the other, aren't you?
Yeah, one would think so.
So it's a question of transparency, and that is the bottom line on everything going forward, ladies and gentlemen. It's transparency. You need to know, and people need to pay attention to what is going on out there and saying enough is enough. When you pull up to the gas station and you go, why am I pumping this ethanol into my car? Why is it that when I'm going to this public school, I know this is a bad teacher? Why am I putting up with this? And we're putting up with this because we continue to send the same people back to Congress, and we have these two parties. There's not even room for a third party to come in. And enough people need to pay attention to what's going on and say, we need a new way of doing things. So read Republic Lost. And, next week, listen in to Justice for All. We're going to have another great show because I like to get people on my show and try to find out what makes them tick and find out, why is it that you wrote this book? And what is this book about? And how is this book going to reduce some of the inequality that we have in America, the unfairness that we have to certain thing? How is it going to change our system for the better? That's what this show is about. I know not everybody out there agrees with me, but we have to start somewhere. We need to improve our society, and we need to do that with educating ourselves as to what the problems are and how we can go about solving them. So come back and see us. This is Justice for All. I'm George Yates. Thanks for joining me. If you want to hear the rest of our podcast from our first hour, please go to my website at ghylaw.com, and we'll hope to see you back here next Saturday from 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock. Bye now.